Today's video is about data types in Java. There are already plenty of videos explaining the different data types in Java, but this video is going to be different from others. We are not only going to understand each of the data types, but also learn a simple visualization trick to easily memorize each group of data types by their size and recollect the information whenever you need them. You might wonder what is the point of memorizing them when we can look them up in the internet anytime. Well, it's always good to know the fundamentals as much as you can by heart. It will be especially helpful if you're on an ambitious career path like a principal software engineer or software architect, or even if you're preparing for competitive programming challenges. If you look at books like Puzzles in Java by Bloch and Gafter, there are several pitfalls that you can avoid by knowing just this fundamental information, which is one reason I decided to make this video. Let's get started. Firstly, Java data types are divided into two types, the primitive and the non-primitive. To remember this, I want you to think of an image of a hunter in a jungle with a bow and 7 arrows. Bow and arrow is a primitive weapon, so you can relate it with the word primitive and use it as a representation of primitive data types. Make sure that you remember the hunter has a stock of exactly 7 arrows. Why 7 arrows? We'll come to that in a minute. For the non-primitive data type, you can think of a man like James Bond in a tuxedo holding a gun. The gun is a modern day weapon and hence we can use it to remember the word non-primitive and hence connect it to the non-primitive data type. Now let's bring your focus back to the bow and 7 arrows and drill a bit deeper to see the hidden tricks here. The word bow stands for Boolean because both the words start with the letters B and O, which holds only two values by the way, that is true or false. It is just 1 or 0, so it takes space of only like 1 bit to store the information. The other 7 arrows stands for the remaining 7 types of data, which are all numeric. Remember that here the type character is also coming under the type numeric data. Before we take a closer look at the arrows, let's talk about size. There is nobody who hasn't come across different size options like medium, large and extra large when purchasing garments, right? Similarly, the hunter also have different categories of arrows and different sizes in each category. However, in the programming world, the computer doesn't understand numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, but just ones and zeros. This is represented using bits. A weird side effect of this is that a size will always be the double of the previous size. So in our case, the smallest arrow starts at 8 bits and then doubles from there like 16, 32 and 64 bits. The arrows category grouping is also interesting. Day 1 is a special type of arrow called character, which is unique and comes in only one size. But day 2 and 3 have the same type of decimal arrows in which they have two different sizes and their names are float and double. Use this information as a trick to remember the grouping of data types. We are understanding the grouping first because we can just focus on learning the size later. Now it is very simple to figure out the remaining 4 belongs to just one group. That is the integer type and their names are byte, short, int and long. If you have come this far, it is a great achievement and you have successfully got all the necessary context to understand the main section of the trick which I am going to explain next. Keep an eye on our size sheet so that you can easily see the available options. So let's look in detail at the arrows used by the hunter on each day of the week to unravel some amazing tricks. On day 1, he uses the character type arrow. This type is used to store a single character value and has a size of 16-bit. A very easy trick here is to notice that the second letter of the char is H and H can stand for the word hexa, which means 6. So we just need to pick the size which has the second value as 6 from the sheet and that is 16. So we can easily remember that character type have 16-bit size. On days 2 and 3, the hunter uses the float and double arrows. These are data types used to represent decimal types. Coincidentally, this day 2 and decimal have a special relation. We sometimes mention 2 as double, which starts with D, and interestingly the word decimal also starts with the letter D. We know that in primitive times people were obsessed with rituals and the hunter may have even found the second day to be very auspicious to use the decimal arrows. So now you can use this relation to always remember that decimal arrows were used on day 2 and not confused with any other type. Now to get into the details, each of these arrows have a name and the first one is float, the second one is double. The size of the float is 32 bits and the size of the double is 64 bits. Now here is a very simple trick to remember this fact. Both the words float and double have the letter O in them. If you count the number of letters after O, you can see that there are 2 letters A and T for float and 4 letters U, B, L, E for double. Now, you just have to remember that float with 2 letters after O needs to pick a value that has the letter 2 from the size sheet, which is 32 bits, and double with 4 letters after O has to pick the size with 4 from the size sheet, which is 64 bits. It is as simple as that. Now we have covered 3 arrows. Let's move to the remaining 4 arrows. Like I said, all of them belong to one group and the group name is integer. The first integer data type is called byte. This is the smallest arrow with size 8 bits. The trick to remember the size is by using rhyming words byte and 8. So it's very easy to remember that bytes require 8 bits. The next type is short. The Java language designers have again left us a pattern by design or by accident here. The second letter of short is also H, so we can simply use the same trick we used for character. That is, we look for the size with the second number as 6 because the letter H stands for hexa, which means 6. Now on day 6, we move to the type int, which is 32 bits. It is really easy to remember the size because int has 3 letters and we just have to pick the size with first number as 3, that is 32 from the size sheet. Last but not the least, we have the longest arrow. We call it the long type and it has a size of 64 bit. How can you can imagine its position and name. Long matches the ordering, which makes it very easy to avoid getting confused with any previous groups or arrows. The last trick we need is to remember the size of long. The solution is to simply count the number of letters in word long, which is 4. Hence we go for the size 64, which is the only size with a 4 from the size sheet. With this we conclude our tricks about primitive data types. An important tip I have to pass on is to think in images. That is, whenever you need to recollect this information, simply start by picturing the hunter and other images in your head first. Then only as a second step, figure out the information. Simply going through these images for some days can really help you store this to your long-term memory effortlessly. The link to download these resources will be provided in the description. We have learned everything about primitive data types, but we also have the non-primitive type like strings. A really simple trick is to imagine James Bond shooting a guitar and the bullet striking on the strings of the guitar. This can help us remember that string is an example of non-primitive data types. With that, let's wrap up this video. Hope you enjoyed the tricks. If you found it useful, do share it with others so that they can also learn with you. Thank you, and I will see you in the next video.